Brother Iakovos is doing research at Dumbarton Oaks, and he'll tell you more, and I'm sure we are ready for him to talk to us, and then you'll be welcome to have questions and answers. We're so happy that we are having such great opportunities. And please, brother.
Thank you for coming here, and sorry for my English if I made mistakes. I don't know how much you know about Mount Athos, so I think I'll start from the basics, so that everybody's on the same level of knowledge. Mount Athos is a peninsula in northern Greece, in Chalkidiki, in the area of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia. And it's an autonomous region that has a constitutional special position in the Greek state. And actually, the Mount Athos doesn't belong to the European Union at all. We're outside the EU. And all inhabitants of Mount Athos are monks. So that makes it a special state in the whole world. And on Mount Athos, there are altogether 20 big monasteries. And in addition to the 20 monasteries, there are about 15 skeets, I can't remember the exact number, and then a few hundreds of cells, huts, caves, or any smaller institutions. And Mount Athos is a very special place when you think about Orthodox monasticism, because it has all the forms of Orthodox monastic life. We have everything from hermits to small brotherhoods where there are 2 to 5 monks, to small monasteries or skeets with 10 to 15 monks, and the big monasteries, like Vatopedi, which is the biggest monastery with about 120 monks. So you can find all the forms of monastic life, and that's actually what on Mount Athos they emphasize, and we emphasize to the aspirant monastics who want to become monks, that you have to find your own way of life that suits you best. Not all of we are made for cenobidic life in a big monastery where there's a strict program, strict obedience to the abbot. Some of us want to be more dedicated to prayer without a lot of work, so then life in a smaller community might be better. We don't actually know that much about the history of Mount Athos. There are many legends, there are many stories about the foundation of Mount Athos. But what we know for sure is that the first monks there were at least in the 9th century. The first monk we know by name is Saint Peter the Athonite, who was a hermit in the southern end of Mount Athos. And the life of Saint Peter the Athonite tells us that the Mother of God, Theotokos, appeared to him and promised that this peninsula will be her garden, and she will protect all the monks who lead an ascetic life in Mount Athos. And slowly, from the times of St. Peter, more and more monks started coming there. And eventually, big monasteries were founded with the kind support of Byzantine emperors. And from the end of 10th century onwards, Mount Athos got already an autonomous position in the Greek state, or in the Byzantine state. But the life on Mount Athos wasn't actually very easy for a long time, because Byzantium suffered a lot in the 13th century and after that. And Mount Athos suffered from pirates for many centuries, from the 14th century onwards. There was a lot of pirates who came to rob the monasteries, and many of the monasteries actually had to give up the traditional lifestyle of Orthodox monasticism. And it led to the decline of Mount Athos that actually existed for centuries, from 14th century until 18th, 19th century. And most of the monasteries were actually converted from this cenobidic lifestyle that we call it. Cenobidic means that the monastery has a very strict common program for all the monks. Everybody has to follow the same program. nobody has personal property, and everybody is absolutely obedient to the abbot. But because of the decline in Athonite monasticism and the lack of monks, this wasn't possible. So most of the monks became independent. They had their own finances. The abbot was more like an administrator of the monastery rather than spiritual father. But then, because Byzantium fell in the 15th century, there was a lot of Russian influence on Mount Athos afterwards. And actually, slowly from the 17th century onwards, especially from the 17th century onwards, there was a lot of Russian monks who used to come to Mount Athos. And this was nothing new to Mount Athos. There were, because it was the Byzantine state, most of the monks were Greeks. But already from the very beginning, there was a Serbian community that we already also have today, the monastery of Filatari. We have a Bulgarian community in the monastery of Zagrafu. We have two Romanian communities in two Skids, and there was also a Georgian community in the monastery of Ibiron, but slowly it changed into a Greek monastery. Nowadays it's a Greek monastery. And there's also a Russian monastery, St. Panteleimon. But from the 17th century onwards, there was a lot of Russian monks who arrived to Mount Athos, and it actually led to the situation that in the end of the 19th century, more than half of the monks of Mount Athos were Russians. But again, history does its own business, and there was a revolution in Russia in 1917, so it was impossible for new monks to arrive in Mount Athos. And when the old Russian monks died, the monasteries remained empty. And in the 1950s and 60s, the number of Athonite monks was very low. And in 1963, they celebrated the 1000th anniversary of the foundation of the oldest monastery of Mount Athos, the Great Lavra, and it was considered like a funeral of Athonite monasticism. Like, these are the last monks who lived there, and when they died, this place will become a museum. But the Mother of God did not abandon Mount Athos, and in the 70s, a group of Greek youngsters, or many groups of Greek youngsters, started to get interested in monastic life. And they demanded fathers from the hermits from the southern end of Mount Athos to become their abbots and to teach the monastic life. And from the 70s onwards, we have this new blossoming of Athonite monasticism, and especially in the big monasteries. We always had hermits in the mountains, in the caves, but the big monasteries were especially suffering. So from the 17s onwards, there was a lot of young monks coming, and now Mount Athos has a very young population. So most of the young monks are under 50 years old, so there's not a lot of old monks anymore. And another thing that is very peculiar from the 70s onwards with this new wave of Athonite monasticism is that there were a lot of educated monks who came to Mount Athos. And a lot of Athonite monks nowadays have master's degrees, PhDs, they work as professors in universities, and this has changed the dynamics of Mount Athos towards the world outside quite a lot. So nowadays, especially in Greece, because it's geographically close to Mount Athos, there's a lot of Athonite influence in all parishes, in all big spiritual centers. Athonite fathers come out to the parishes to confess, to do confessions, to give talks, etc. And as for myself, I'm from the monastery of Xenophontos. Stand out. Okay. I'm from the monastery of Xenophontos, and our monastery actually is a part of this story of Athonite revival. Our abbot, Alexios, used to be a teacher in a boys' school in central Greece. And he was a hieromonk who lived outside of the monastery. But then, when the boys became older and they had to leave the school, they didn't want to leave their teacher. So they asked our abbot Alexios to become their abbot and found a monastery. And at that time, the other big monastic center in Greece, Meteora, had an empty monastery because one of the brotherhoods had already left to Mount Athos. So our abbot took over the monastery and took many of the young boys to become monks with him. But as many mothers probably can identify themselves with this worry of losing their children, many Greek mothers with their fervent motherly instincts tried to steal their boys back from the abbot. So our abbot basically had to escape with the monk somewhere else where he could be safe from the mothers. So at the same time there was a monastery of Mount Athos, Xenophontos, that only had a few old monks that couldn't really take care of the monastery anymore. And the holy community of Mount Athos asked our abbot Alexios to move to Mount Athos with all his monks. So that's how our brotherhood was founded in 1977. So next year we'll celebrate the 40 years of our brotherhood on Mount Athos, and we had the same abbot until now. And also, the new revival got even stronger from 1990s onwards, when communism fell in many European countries. So now, for the first time after the early 20th century, the Russians were also able to come to Mount Athos, Bulgarians and Serbians. And this is also where we have a lot of significant growth in the Russian monastery and in the Serbian one. It's very difficult to say the numbers because we don't have any central statistics on Mount Athos about the amount of monks. They say that in the 60s, when there was this worst decline in the history of Mount Athos, there were only 1,000 monks in the whole peninsula. Nowadays they say that it's 2,000, but they've been saying the same thing for 20 years. And there's a lot of new monks coming, and our brotherhood is growing all the time, so I can't believe that 2,000 would apply anymore, so I think it's closer to 3,000. But as I said, there are no central statistics of the number of monks that we can say. But as I said in the beginning, Mount Athos is the garden of the Mother of God. That's what we call it in Crete. It's the Peripolitis Panagias. And this is a promise that the Mother of God gave to Saint Peter the Athonite when he was a hermit in the southern end of Mount Athos. And there's a lot of other stories about the dedication of Mount Athos to Virgin Mary. And we actually call her our abbess. Our abbots are only substitutes for her when she is absent. But we believe that she is the real abbot of Mount Athos. We also call her the Ikonomos of Mount Athos, which means the... what's Ikonomos in English? Steward? It's Ikonomos, like the ones who takes care of the finances. So, treasurer of Mount Athos. And as you all probably know, Mount Athos is the last of the big monastic centers in the world that still keep the traditional custom of not allowing women to enter the area. This is a question we often get as Athonite monastics, like why don't we let women come there? There are many reasons why we don't let women come there. One of the biggest reasons is that we only have one woman, and that's Virgin Mary. She is our only woman. But the other reason is a more practical one that comes from the history of Orthodox monasticism. Actually, in the past, all monasteries used to have this ban on the opposite sex. So, in female convents, male visitors were never accepted. And in male monasteries, female visitors were never accepted. And this is not only to protect a monastery from temptations and protect us much from temptations. That's certainly one of the aspects we have. But it's also a way of preserving the silence of the monastery. And this is a very practical issue that emerged in the last decades in Greece, because this other big monastic center in central Greece, Meteora, used to have also a ban to female visitors. But then they allowed female visitors in the area. And what happened? In a few years there were tourist buses, there weren't pilgrims anymore, foreign tourists who make a lot of noise. They come in with their shorts, they smoke their cigarettes in the monastery yards, and monastic life died in Meteora. Now there are a couple of monasteries that try to struggle and try to keep monastic life alive still there, But this is definitely the thing that we don't want for Mount Athos to happen. But instead, we think that Mount Athos is our spiritual home, and it's like every person has the right to say who comes to visit his home. We don't have to accept visitors that we don't want to visit our home. But what we want to do is do an outreach from Mount Athos to the outside world. And as I said, in Greece, we have a lot of priest monks going to parishes, to other churches to do speeches, to do confessions. But also, one of the most important outreaches of Mount Athos today is the intellectual outreach, I would say. The books we write, there's a big number of books that are published every year on Mount Athos nowadays. We don't only publish about theology, we also publish about archaeology, about the history of Mount Athos. We also try to make the treasures of the libraries of Mount Athos available to scholars outside, especially the female scholars who can't enter the libraries of Mount Athos. So now we have, for example, in our monastery, we're doing this huge digitalization project of digitalizing all the Byzantine manuscripts that we have in our monastery. And on Mount Athos altogether we have tens of thousands of Byzantine manuscripts. And most of them are still studied by nobody. So basically the history of our whole church lies there in the libraries. And this is what we now try to offer to the outside world, to give people the possibility to study this and to study the history of our church. And we, of course, we try to make our best also to study the things, but life in the monastery is a bit difficult for scholarly purposes, so that's why we have to escape every now and then to come to Dumbarton Oaks to concentrate on things. In the monastery, we have a very strict schedule in all Athonite monasteries, and many visitors who come to Mount Athos, they say that the most impressive thing is not the relics we have. We have a lot of relics. In our monastery we have the right arm of St. George, we have the skull of St. Tryphon, we have relics of St. Marina, we have a piece of the cross of the Lord. And we monks, we sometimes get used to these things, which is a bad thing. Because we kiss the right hand of St. George every day, so St. George is basically our friend, we're just going to greet her in the church every day. It's not only the amazing architecture we have on Mount Athos. Not many of us live in a 10th century building, like I do. It's also not the amazing nature of Mount Athos. It's also naturally a very special place. There are about 30 species of plants that don't exist anywhere else in the world than Mount Athos, because the nature has been preserved so well. But the most striking thing on Mount Athos is the life of the monks. And even more peculiarly, it's the happy faces of the monks on Mount Athos. And this is what strikes people the most when we talk to visitors and we ask them, well, like, what did you like the most? Most of them say that they expected us to be very grumpy, very tired, serious ascetics. But then they see this strict lifestyle that we have. In the winter we wake up 1 a.m. to pray. Then we go to church at 2 a.m. and the visitors are also supposed to come to church at 2 a.m. Not many of them appear, but they're supposed to come there. Then we pray for 3.5 hours in a cold, dark church. Then we get to rest for a while. Then we wake up again to pray for half an hour. Then we eat. We never eat meat. We have very simple food, but it's grown by us. We have organic vegetables from our own gardens. Then we go to work. We had a lot of physical work. The work might be boring. You have to clean toilets, or you have to carry rocks on a field. Or you paint icons, or you write books, whatever the abbot tells you to do. Then in the afternoon we eat the second time of the day. We only have 2 meals a day. And then we again go to church for 1.5 hours. Then we have then we do some more work, and then it's evening already. And as you can hear from the schedule, we don't sleep that much. Sleep is not very appreciated on Mount Athos. And people think that this kind of lifestyle would make you very tired, very grumpy, very bored. But the result is the opposite. Athonite monks usually have a smile on their faces. They usually welcome all the visitors with welcoming words. We like visitors coming to the monasteries. And this is because this is what I talked about in the sermon today. When we give up all these material cares and when we dedicate really our lives to God, it results in the spiritual joy. And it's a miracle. Like when I come outside from Mount Athos, me myself, I have a position in Finland at the university, so I have to come outside from the monastery very often, and I stay half of the year in Finland. And every time I'm in Finland, I'm outside of the monastery. I don't have the monastic rhythm in my blood as strongly as in the monastery. I feel tired. I feel grumpy. I'm sometimes rude to my students. But once I go to the monastery, I sleep much less, I do much more physical work, and I'm happy like I'm in heaven. And this is the biggest secret of Mount Athos, and the most striking feature of Orthodox monastic life. And this does not have to stay only on Mount Athos. I think Mount Athos is just as I said today, a lighthouse that shows the direction to other monasteries and other people and lay people in our lives. And it's actually very rarely that somebody leaves Mount Athos indifferent. Usually when you come there, something changes as a pilgrim. Well, of course, we monks, something changes, we get new clothes and everything, but even for the pilgrims, when they come there, something changes. Some people are very shocked about it, and they want to leave immediately. They can't take it. And some people start thinking their lives all over again. And this is basically the most important contribution of Mount Athos to Orthodoxy, is to make people think, to rearrange their priorities in life, to really understand what is important in life, and to dedicate as much time as possible to prayer and simple lifestyle. I'm not going to tire you with other talk. I didn't do as historical as I thought I would do today, but I was thinking that maybe it's much more interesting for you.
Can you take another one?
To hear personal experiences rather than just a historical account. You can read the history books. The microphone isn't helping me a lot. But if you want to ask any questions, if you have any comments, you're welcome to answer us. I'm studying the development of the cult of the Virgin Mary as a monastic model in Byzantium. Because we know, as I said, that Mount Athos was dedicated to the Virgin from the very beginning. But we don't know very well what happened before this, like what led in historical terms to this dedication. And there is we already have from the 4th century some texts by Saint Athanasius the Great, where he talks about Virgin Mary as a model for virgins. Because at that time in Alexandria, where he was a bishop, there was a group of virgin ascetics, women who lived an ascetic life as virgins. And of course, Virgin Mary is the virgin. And the Saint Athanasius the Great wrote some letters to the virgins where he says that the virgin was a great ascetic. She was always obedient to her parents, and especially obedient to God. She was also fasting, she never ate too much, and she was always happy with everything. So she was also a great ascetic. But then after St. Athanasius, this idea doesn't appear as much in the Fathers as one would imagine. And when you read monastic literature from the 5th century onwards, they don't basically even mention the Theotokos anywhere. But then around iconoclasm, in the 8th century, Mary enters the monastic scene again, and this finally leads to the dedication of Mount Athos in the 9th and 10th centuries to the Virgin. And I'm studying like all these details in this development and trying to find the sources that tell us more about the development.
If I can ask a question.
Well, I'm not a specialist on America because I live here, here for 7 weeks, but I know that there are a lot of Athonite monasteries now in the States founded by Elder Ephraim of Arizona. And it's also one way, it's not only about founding monasteries, but also probably, I don't know how much the books of St. Paisios have been translated into English, probably all of them. He's basically the most important messenger of Athonite spirituality, also to Greece, like mainland Greece. And he is the most famous Athonite monk anybody knows in Greece. So, and when you read the writings of St. Paisios, it's very strict, in a way. But he also has a great sense of humor, and he speaks the language of the people today. Me as a patristic scholar, I often notice that we who read a lot of fathers, we just repeat the words of the fathers that are valuable in themselves. But if you're not familiar with the language of the fathers, they might seem incomprehensible to you. And St. Paisios had this mercy from God to speak in the language of the people nowadays. And he can use metaphors from the modern life, and he has this great sense of humor. We live in the age of humor and we love jokes, so this is also what needs to be done in order to approach the modern people. But as for America, especially, I'm not the best person to say anything because I don't know the American situation so well. But when it comes to monasticism, being from Finland, where we have historically an Orthodox church, but it's still a minority, I've noticed that it's actually it's been perhaps much easier for me to become a monk than many of my Greek friends, which is surprising, because in Greece there's a lot of monasteries and there are maybe thousands of monks and nuns around Greece. In Finland we have like 10 monks and 10 nuns in the whole country. But still, the thing is that in a somehow multicultural society as America is, and as Finland is becoming nowadays, it's easier to promote your personal beliefs than often in a country that only belongs to, like only follows one religion. Because this is what we see in Greece now. Most of Greeks are Orthodox, as we know. 95%, 97% of Greeks are officially Orthodox. But now there's this very strong movement against the church. And as a monk, I'm usually much more respected when I go to a bank in Finland than when I go to a bank in Greece. Father Paisios also, Saint Paisios, told a lot of these kind of stories from the simple faith of the Athonites. It's not about theorizing about the invisible world and everything. It's an everyday experience. For example, Saint Paisios has this story in one of his books, because he used to be a monk in the monastery of Esmikmeno, which is dedicated to the Ascension. And Ascension in Greek is analipsy, and it's a feminine word. And this simple monk didn't know that analipsy, Ascension, is a feast. He thought it's a saint, Saint Ascension. And all the monks were saying, it's not a saint, it's a feast, like when God went up to heaven. No, it's Saint Analipsy, he helps us always, she helps us always. And one day, this monk used to come and help in the hospital of the monastery, and they ran out of food. And the sick monks needed something to eat. And this monk ran to the window, and the hospital is in the 5th or 7th floor of the monastery, high from the sea. And he reached out his hand and said, Saint Analipsy, help us. And a huge fish jumped from the sea to his arms. And he was, thank you, Saint Analipsy, and went to feed the monks. And this is what St. Paisios told that it's not, even though we like to theologize about things, and we, especially with scholarly monks, we like to study things, the most important thing in the end is this steadfast faith in God and in His miracles, even though it's not correct, like in this case.
Are there any female monks in your monastery, or no?
No, there are no females. But we have, actually, one of the ministries that the Athonite monasteries nowadays do is opening female monasteries outside of Mount Athos that follow the lifestyle of Athonite monasteries. So this is also a contemporary way of offering to the women also an Athonite experience. And our monastery also has a convent in northern Greece, near Ceres, near the Bulgarian border, where we have about 40 nuns, I think. And the lifestyle is exactly the same as in Mount Athos. They have the same schedule, they have the same architecture, they do the same arts, everything is the same, except that they're nuns. So this is also what Elder Ephraim has been doing here in America. There's a lot of female monasteries that follow exactly the same lifestyle as Athonite monasteries. And from the monastic point of view, this is a recent development that Mount Athos has become like the status quo of monasticism, and many monasteries like to adopt Athonite rules for their life. It depends on the monastery. There were some heavy taxes from the Ottomans that the monasteries had to pay, but the biggest problems were not with the empire itself, but with the pirates. So that's why many of the monasteries, when you look at Athonite monasteries, they have huge walls, especially the ones that are by the seaside. Huge walls, and then you can see small windows. And through those windows, the monks had to fight the pirates. And it was a very difficult thing. Actually, the funniest thing is that now women are not allowed in Mount Athos, but they can do tours with boat outside of Mount Athos. And one of the boats they have nowadays is a pirate boat. And it's always very funny when we sit on the balcony of the monastery and this pirate boat comes from the horizon and reminds us of history, but luckily they don't rob us anymore. Well, basically all Mount Athos belongs directly to the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So whatever your ethnicity is, you belong to the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So the ethnical jurisdictions like Church of Russia, Serbia, Bulgaria don't have any power on Mount Athos. But in a practical sense, most of the monasteries are very independent. And the monastic community of Mount Athos has this central government called the Holy Community, which has one representative from each monastery. And they meet a couple of times a week to discuss practical matters. And if there's something very important to decide, they also call the abbots of each monastery. So then it's 40 monks who decide. At the moment, no. I'm not sure what they're going to do with the manuscripts in the end. Actually, here in Washington, D.C., you're very lucky because the Library of Congress has a lot of microfilms from Athonite manuscripts and other manuscripts. But I'm not sure what the plan is, if they're going to put them online or if they just keep them for the monastery. But anyway, it will be easier to access the photos than the real manuscript itself.
Was Mount Athos significantly affected by Nazi occupation in 1941?
Well, the Nazis didn't occupy Mount Athos as such. I'm not sure about the exact development of the things, but some Nazis came to Mount Athos. But also the monasteries hid people in the monasteries to protect them from the Germans. So Mount Athos was much better off than the rest of Greece during the German occupation. Thank you for your attention.